थैंक यू सो मच.
बोलना चाहोगे रविंदर?
हाँ जी, हाँ जी.
आओ बोलो.
हेलो. सम्मानित मंच, आदरणीय सभी भी महापुरुषों एवं माताओं बहनों, मैं श्री कृष्ण को साक्षी मानकर इस लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल में जितने भी पधारे सभी अतिथिगणों को मेरे हृदय से प्रणाम करता हूँ. आज मुझे बहुत बड़ी खुशी होती है जब इतना बड़ा मंच हर साल मुझे मिलता है. तो पहले भी मैंने फेस्टिवल में परफॉर्मेंस किया, मुझे बहुत खुशी हुई. और अब मैं ज़्यादा तो समय नहीं लेते हुए 3 पॉइंट मैं रखना चाहूँगा. कि मेरा पहला जो पॉइंट है कि कला तो अपनी जगह है ही है, लेकिन कला से भी ज़्यादा महत्व है शिक्षा. तो मैं आप सबसे एक निवेदन करना चाहूँगा कि अगर हो सकता है तो मेरी बात सरकार तक पहुँचाने की ज़रूर कोशिश करें कि इस भारत के अंदर कई ऐसे कलाकार भी होंगे जिनके पास टैलेंट तो बहुत है, लेकिन शिक्षा शायद नहीं मिल पाती है या कुछ रीज़न होता है होगा. तो मेन डिसेबिलिटीज़ पर्सन्स के लिए आप बात पहुंचाएं तो बहुत अच्छा है, क्योंकि मुझे बहुत खुशी होती है कि जब एक प्रशासनिक अधिकारी मैम ने मुझे ये बताया था कि कला से ज़्यादा शिक्षा के ऊपर आप ज़रूर ध्यान देना, कला एक इम्पोर्टेंट है. और मुझे बहुत खुशी होती है कि अच्छे अच्छे मार्गदर्शक हमें मिले और आज हमने बहुत कुछ जो सीखा. और मेरे जो फ्लूट है उसमें 10-11 साल का मुझे एक्सपीरियंस है. और सो बेसिकली दिस इज़ गॉड गिफ्टेड टैलेंट. सो ज़्यादा समय नहीं लेते हुए मैं आप सबको एक बार हृदय से प्रणाम करता हूँ.
People ask me, have you seen a shift in attitudes when it comes to disability in the last decade? I said, measure the time when Jaipur Literature Festival started having a session on disability. So I think the fact that we've started having disability and having a platform to have this discussion is a measure of some progress. So Sanjay sir, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. The topic of our discussion is called invisible majority, and I don't know whether Sanjay decided to call that because of the title of my book, which is called Invisible Majority. I'm not trying to promote my book, but this is called The Invisible Majority, India's Abled Disabled. The topic we want to cover today is really called accessibility for all. Now, obviously, everybody who's here knows what accessibility is all about, so I don't have to go in greater detail about it. But I really wanted to share at a broad level what are the areas on which we want to have a dialogue here. When you talk about accessibility, I see as 4 basic pillars. The first is information, which is very important. So how do you make information accessible? The easiest thing that we all speak about is whether you have content on the internet, on digital or an analog form, how can you make those information available for all, not just people with abilities, but people with disabilities? That's the first one. The second is how do you make a place accessible, a physical space accessible? Whether it is this stage, is this accessible? Yes, there is a way for a wheelchair person to come from the other side, but I'm not too sure if its gradient is accurate enough. But how do you make physical spaces fully accessible for all? I mean, that's a very important topic. The third aspect of accessibility is really services. How do you make services accessible? Now, any form of service, whether you go to a restaurant and can a person with disability enjoy the same ambience as everybody else? Whether you are booking an Uber, for example, to go to one place to the other, is it equally accessible for a person with disability? And the last element, or the last pillar of accessibility is really the overall environment. Once we achieve that, and I think accessibility is the basic lowest common denominator that should be available for people with disabilities to lead a life that is equitable and inclusive like everybody else. And that's what the next 45 minutes we are going to speak about. We have an incredible lineup of panelists here, and all of them have a very different lived experience. Dr. Anil, who has a lived experience with his visual impairment, he will share his journey of not only excelling even with his condition, but having done some landmark work in the field of disability so that other people are able to lead a much more equitable life. Justice Nazmi has done, he's probably more known for as the Green Justice for all the work he's done for environment, but he's also passed some landmark judgments for people with disabilities. I'd like to dig a little bit deep into that a little later. We have two people who have a lived experience as a parent, as a caregiver. And so Srilata ma'am has a 21-year-old daughter who has dyslexia. Now, what are the challenges you face when you have a daughter who have a learning disability? Many of them have to be homeschooled and so on. And my very good friend Debashis, who had a 26-year-old son, Noel, and he wrote a beautiful book. And I see this as a huge resource for me personally, because I have a son who's 15 years old on the autism spectrum, nonverbal. So I wasn't able, after reading his book, I was able to understand what my son is thinking about. Unfortunately, Noel passed away at the age of 26 in 2019, but he's written a very moving account of some of his learnings through the journey of being a caregiver. So you see, we are coming from multiple directions. One as a caregiver, one as somebody who has a lived experience, and Justice as somebody who's trying to implement what I think is one of the most powerful frameworks, legal frameworks anywhere in the world. So before we start, I hope all of you are kind of warmed up for this interesting discussion. Just give a big round of applause for this wonderful panelists who all are here. The way I'm going to structure is that, I must tell you that, everybody has so much to speak about, so I will be a little tough on them to keep to the time. Each of them will give like a 3-minute introduction, not just about themselves, but their journeys in this area, and then I will ask pointed questions, and we'll use the last 10 minutes for Q&A with the audience. So let me start with Dr. Anil. Please share your journey in a quick 3 minutes, and I'm kind of keeping my time.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ferose. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. A very difficult task assigned to me, to someone whose profession is to talk, and I get paid for it, as a professor of English, to sum up n number of years. I will not tell you how many. I don't want to reveal my age at this stage. If Akshay is here, and he asked me in the morning, Ajay, I think, and he asked me about the age, and I said certain secrets should not be revealed. So that being the case, yes, so I will be very brief. At the outset, deep gratitude to JNF, particularly to Sanjay, the co-directors, Namita and William, and my mentor, Professor Marishi Dan, who has given me an unfailing sense of security over a period of 40 years. She's always been there as my mentor, my guide, and my mother, and a great champion of disability, even at a time when disability was not even talked of. As far as my journey is concerned, it's a long journey, but making it short, as brief as possible, I would say this has been a combination of two contradictions, resistance and negotiation. I come from a time where my family did not want me to study because they said that was the best thing for me. Why should I trouble myself? The family could support me. And when I did resist, they did send me to a special school, were very supportive, but what would the school do? There were no school books. Despite that, I struggled hard and got a position in the merit list in CBSE all over India. In fact, came to know about my result for CBSE from the radio, not from my school first. Went into St. Stephen's College, scored many firsts in many things, which I don't want to get into. Was the first to do PhD in the Department of English, first visually impaired person. And then faced challenges when principals did not want to interview me. They said, when we don't want to appoint a visually impaired person, why interview? To a point when today I had the coveted Department of English, University of Delhi, which is ranked among the top 150 departments of the world. I oversee English studies in 68 colleges and look after research and also master's teaching. To a point when I'm the president of a major NGO, founding director, Center for Disability Studies, University of Delhi. All these have not been easy by any standards. I come from a period when accessibility was not even heard of. Today we are talking about accessibility in JNF, which is a historic day because this will open a new discourse countrywide and even worldwide in the area of disability and disability studies. But at the same time, I would say that accessibility in the context of persons with disabilities is a very limiting understanding. I'm happy that we are using the term accessibility for all, but I would say we should go further and say universal design for all, which is the current discourse. It is not that accessibility is required only for persons with disability, it's required for all. Secondly, we have stereotyped disability in certain parameters, ramps, lifts, signages, brain, so on and so forth. No. Accessibility is in terms of environment, in terms of attitudes, in terms of acceptability, in terms of inclusion. And unless we are able to ensure acceptability by way of inclusion, no accessible provisions would be really meaningful. The third point I want to make is that accessibility is cost intensive. It's important that strong budgetary provisions are made to ensure that everything is accessible. And I would make a recommendation to JLF that at least please encourage all your authors and publishers to ensure that all their books and publications are in born accessible formats, whether these are print books, videos, audios, or anything else. That would be a major achievement of JLF as far as accessibility is concerned. I have much more to say, but I think Ferose been very nice to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Justice साहब, आप हिंदी में बात करना चाहेंगे कि
बोलने की आदत नहीं रही है, इतने बरसों से खामोश बैठते थे. बहरहाल इजाज़त ले ली हिंदुस्तानी में बात करने की. पहली बात तो सबको मुबारकबाद देता हूँ जो यहाँ मौजूद हैं. इट्स अ टेस्टिमनी ऑफ योर, अरे भाई मैं ऐसे ही बात करता हूँ. It's a testimony because if I speak very loudly, you'll possibly hear me, but I would like you to listen to me. It's a testimony of your compassion that you are here together. ये मौजू जो है, this subject is not really in the forefront always, and that's why JLF and the organizers have to be complimented for that. We're talking about the silent majority. वो खामोश अक्सरियत जिसको खामोश नहीं रहना है, अगर वो खामोश ना रहे तो ये मुश्किलें ना होंगी जिसका जिक्र अभी अनेजा साहब ने किया है. There should be ramps, there should be facilities, there should be. देखिए जो एक्ट है ना, जो कानून है, वो बहुत ही उम्दा कानून है, बहुत ही उम्दा कानून है. उसमें सारी प्रोविजंस हैं, लेकिन उसको मुहैया कराने के लिए एक हमेशा जद्दोजहद करनी पड़ती है. क्यों करनी पड़ती है? इससे बड़ी मुश्किल है. वो ऐसे मैटर्स आते हैं अदालत में हमारे पास, और जज साहब बैठे हैं यहाँ पर सामने हमारे, बहुत सारे लोग हैं, इनके सामने जब मैटर्स जाते हैं तो वी हैव टू बी क्रिएटिव एंड फाइंड सॉल्यूशंस टू दैट, और ऐसे सॉल्यूशंस जो आइंदा आने वाले केसेस को रोक दें. तो यू लुक एट द म्यूनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशन, यू लुक एट द गवर्नमेंट, यू लुक एट द टॉप ऑफ द मैनेजमेंट एंड द एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन कि ये मुश्किल क्यों हो रही है, आइंदा ना हो, इसलिए आप इस पर शुरुआत करिए. It's not just a physical access to place, it's also your employment, the infrastructure and the माहौल in which you are working. वो उसको देखना होता है अक्सर हमें. उसका मौका फिर आएगा, बताऊंगा आपको. लेकिन मुझको जो नज़र आता है, हमेशा जजेस को नज़र जो आता था कि there was a lack of sensitivity being displayed by people. सबसे बड़ी मुश्किल ये थी, किसी को बेचारगी की तरह से नहीं देखना है. उस शख्स का हक लिखा हुआ है उस कानून में, वो हक दिलाना हमारा फ़र्ज़ बनता है. अगर हम फ़र्ज़ मान लें तो यकीन मानिए किसी को मुश्किल नहीं होने वाली है. आपको एक बढ़िया जगह जाना है, बैठना है, सब कुछ आप कर सकते हैं, लेकिन उस शख्स का हक है जिसको हु इज़ डिसेबल्ड, इस बात को औरों तक पहुंचाना है, इस बात को औरों को एहसास दिलाना है. एंड वी हैव टू इंश्योर कि उनका पहल पहले होगा. मुझे एक वाक़या याद आता है, चंद दिनों पहले बात है, इन हैदराबाद वी आर बोर्डिंग अ प्लेन. तो वो जो सिक्योरिटी होती है ना, सिक्योरिटी पे, तो वो छोटे छोटे उनके दरवाजे होते हैं. द जेंटलमैन ऑन द व्हील चेयर कुडंट गो थ्रू. मैं देख रहा था काफ़ी देर से उनका जो है वो जो जयपुर फुट वगैरह निकाल दिया था उन्होंने दोनों पाँव के. वो बेचारे यहाँ से वहाँ लेके जा रहे थे. किसी पे क्या गुजर रही है आप समझ नहीं रहे. और वो शख्स को यहाँ और वहाँ, और फिर हमने ख़ुद लाइन को रोक दिया. हमने कहा मैं तो नहीं जाने वाला आगे, पहले इनको तरजीह दीजिए. एंड एवरीबडी एल्स अंडरस्टूड 2-3 rows. आई सेड वी विल नॉट गो अहेड. फर्स्ट यू फाइंड अ सोल्यूशन फॉर दिस जेंटलमैन हियर. पहले आपका अगर हम तरीक़ा इख्तियार करते हैं तो अपने आप वो ऑफिसर और वो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर उनके लिए बनाई जाएगी. मैं समझता हूँ शुरुआत यहाँ होती है. वी हैव टू हैव द कंपैशन टू डील विद दिस इशूज़. शुरुआत वहाँ से होती है, वरना तो हमें हमेशा लगता है कि अंधेरा है, कोई शुरुआत नहीं है. अंधेरा कहीं नहीं है. अगर अंधेरा है तो हमें अपने अंदर की रोशनी देखनी है, उस अंदर रोशनी को बाहर निकालना है. देयर इज़ नथिंग एल्स टू इट. अदालतों में आना बड़ा मुश्किल होता है, पैसा खर्च होता है, वक्त खर्च होता है. किसके पास इतनी सहूलतें हैं कि वो आ सकते हैं अदालत में? नहीं आ सकते. इसलिए अब कानून की बात तो बहुत सारी है. शुरुआत इतना ही कहूँगा, वी नीड टू शो मोर कंपैशन to everybody else to fight for their rights. To fight for their rights. अनेजा साहब ने कहा इनकी एक बहुत ज़बरदस्त दास्तां रही है, इनकी एक बहुत it's a great struggle for him, जहाँ पहुँचे हैं आप. लेकिन ऐसी ही स्ट्रगल सबकी ना हो, मैं समझता हूँ कि इसलिए ज़रूरी है कि हम सब साथ में चलें. We should not be a silent majority. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Saab. Thank you so much. Srilata ma'am.
Yeah, thank you to JLF for supporting this very historic session. There is this old Buddhist story which I think has resonances for our panel and our conversation today. So when Kissa Gautami, who is the wife of a very wealthy man from Kosala, loses her only son, she's overcome by sorrow, right? So story goes that she goes to the Buddha and then she sort of, because following the advice of somebody who says, go and meet Buddha, he will tell you how to cope with your grief. So she goes to meet the Buddha and the Buddha says, go to every house in this village and bring me a few mustard seeds from the house of somebody who has not lost anybody, a house where there has been no death, right? It's a story that I'm sure all of you know. And of course, Kissa Gautami sets off to do this, and then she comes back empty-handed because she finds that death, the experience of death and dying, has touched every household in that village, right? And so in a sense, I really believe that the same holds for the experience of disability. There is nobody here, I think in this audience, on this panel, who hasn't been touched in some way or the other by the experience of disability. Our own bodies sometimes let us down. We may acquire a disability, even if we are not sort of, we don't have a disability by birth. We may know somebody in our families, in our close circle of friends who have a disability, right? So the disability experience, what I really want to highlight is that it is not something that happens elsewhere, that happens to somebody else, that's not us. It might happen to us. It is probably happening to us, even as we are sitting here and talking about this thing, because there's always a process of aging, right? And we started by talking about accessibility, and that's so right, because if you don't have ramps, if you don't have accessible venues, it's going to be harder for all of us as we grow older, right? So I think this is very important for us to understand that when you make an accessible society, it is not just for somebody who has to use a wheelchair or somebody who is visually impaired or whatever, it's for all of us, right? So that's one thing. And the other is the whole idea of a visible and an invisible disability. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when it comes to the next round. But just to say that there is, I think we should really not hierarchize disabilities. An invisible disability, the one that we cannot see, such as the one that my daughter faced, that of dyslexia, right, is as important and sometimes even harder than a visible disability, right? So that's what I wrote about in this book called This Kind of Child, which, anyway, I'll talk about that a little bit later. Thank you.
Thank you, Srilata ma'am. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming for this unique session, I would say, and first time for JLF, where they have pioneered the inclusion of disability as a theme for discussion. So, going back to your question, my journey has been a very typical journey, actually. I started off my career in the corporate world, and typically in the corporate executive, ambitions are set, targets are set, promotions are sought, big increments are sought, greater responsibility is sought, so it was very career-focused. And then we had our first child, Pia. Noel's mother is also here. We had our first child, and he was diagnosed to be on the autism spectrum. Now, when this diagnosis was given to us in Bombay, we were from Calcutta. We could not get a diagnosis for him through the pediatricians there. So life turned upside down because neither of us, though fairly well educated, had even heard the term autism at that point. And we are talking just 25 years back. So everything had to be recalibrated in life. So begin with, first and foremost, your own ambition, your own priorities, what you would seek out of life now. So that for me was a very important sort of marker. The second thing that happened was the search for information, because frankly, at that time at least, the doctors knew very little. Beyond giving the diagnosis, they could not give us any guidance or therapeutic advice. And there was no internet. And, you know, we take the internet knowledge, free resources for granted now. You know, without Google, we can't think anything, you know. So that time we had to travel overseas to UK and to the US to get to know the subject first and foremost. So that's how the journey started, and every day was a new challenge. Okay, that's why I often reflect on this notion of mine, which I talk about in my book, which is everyday courage. What gets applauded, what gets celebrated are those big wins in life. You know, the big promotion, the medal I win at in the sports competition, or I've come first in the class, and that's what parents urge you to also, right? There is a comprehensive pressure on the child. And I started questioning that. So it had to be about how you deal with your everyday, because the child will progress, will learn on a daily basis. So my concept of everyday courage includes, you know, answers what Professor Aneja earlier mentioned about access to inclusivity. Without the inclusion in our society, we cannot say we have access. So that's the profound, you know, concept on which I would say the first step is general awareness and understanding of what Srilata mentioned about invisible disabilities, you know, and the challenges which come with that. So that awareness is very important because, you know, all said and done, these kids who growing up with this condition, whatever strategies you follow and however, you know, well those are sort of executed, you will have a huge stumbling block when it comes to higher education, higher schooling, training, vocational training, and ultimately employment. So we cannot imagine a society which sort of relegates these kids to the background. So we are seeking equality, and then only we get access.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm looking at the time and I'm like, how did all the time come down to already 7 minutes or less than 6 minutes? Now, I have to very quickly ask everybody one question before I open it up for the audience. Dr. Anil, one of the big questions is, we have an extremely powerful legal system or a law in place, but the real shift is how do we shift our mindset? I want you to quickly respond to that. How do we shift people's mindset about disability and inclusion?
Yeah, 2 or 3 things I would like to talk about. One, that I am a positivist, and I see the glass as half full and half empty both. Most people, when we talk about disability and accessibility, talk about the present and what we should do in the present. But I also come from a tradition where I know the word accessibility and disability was not even talked of. And accessibility, we couldn't think of in terms of accessibility. In my own case, I wanted to do IAS, and I was told that visually impaired persons were not allowed to appear in IAS at that time. I wanted to do management, and then I was told by a very premier management institute of the country that while your records are fine, but we have no facilities. It was only in 1993 when National Federation of Blind versus Union of India, Supreme Court passed an order due to which many persons are now working as IAS or IFS officer. The point I'm trying to make is that there has been a great change, and we should not undermine that. And there's been a great change in the last 40 years due to the struggles that has happened in the disability sector itself, of which I'm a part. I'm a great advocate for disability rights, have a number of PINs, which I won, which I don't want to talk about. So the point I'm trying to make is that one is that persons with disabilities, I strongly object to the term disabled person or Divyang. There's nothing Divyang about me. I'm an ordinary person, and let me be human. I don't want to divine. And I'm not a disabled person. I'm a person first, then person with disability. So I think these mindsets, language is very, very important.
Yeah.
And so the point I'm trying to make is that it's important that we do not undermine all the struggles that happened in the country last 50 years, due to which we have centers for disability studies in various universities, due to which we have the RPWD Act, due to which perhaps indirectly we have the JLF session also today. So it's important that we should recognize this struggle, and as members of responsible civil society or other responsible members of civil society, we should carry forward this crusade. I will not use the word struggle. This crusade to ensure inclusion through our own action first. For instance, a small thing, when you see a person, a buffet, and a person with disability, wheelchair, visual impairment, how does he or she access a buffet? Have you ever thought about that? Have you thought about the fact that when people introduce themselves in a networking meeting, they would go to everybody, but they would not come to a person with disability. They would rather expect the person to go to them. So that is not inclusion. So our own attitude first, as responsible members of civil society, our support, and expose more and more persons with disabilities to the civil society through events such as the JLF is having today. So at schools, in colleges, the more visible such persons are, the more integrated these are from early times, the more the attitudes would change. That would be my take on this.
Thank you, Dr. Anil. Fantastic. I'll let Dr. Anil have the last word. I think it's important. I see just 4 minutes remaining. So I'll open it up for questions with the audience. And if there are questions, please raise your hands. I hope there's a mic runner there. Can we take 2 questions together, just in the interest of time? Ma'am, you can ask your question first, and we'll go there as well. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, panelist. My
you.
question to Honorable Judge Najmi Waziri sir. Sir, आपको ये लगता है कि justice delayed, justice denied का जो concept है, वो deprived group को ये कहने से दूर रखता है कि साडा हक ऐथे रख?
Fantastic. Thank you. Sir, Justice will answer that. There was one more question. I'm just trying to optimize the time here. Can you take one more question in the front, the lady in the front? We'll quickly answer one by one. Okay, yeah.
Thank you, and it is a great panel, and it was a great feeling to hear all of you. So my question is, like, I work for one of the local radio networks. So my question is, as a person with disability, you have a family member or you have a practical experience in living with them. So it is easy to like watch movies like Tare Zameen Pe or any such movies, or have a such discussions and like showing sympathy, like yes, we should help them first or let them go first or such things. But what it takes to like help that individual as your child or as your family member each day going through that is a difficult task. Please.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'll take that question. I'll take one more question, and then I'll allow the panelists to go through it. Yes, sir.
Hi. Thank you so much. My name is Vidur. Previously, I have been a digital designer who's also given accessibility guidelines at Google and with many health apps. So my question is, you know, as the responsibility for Indian digital designers, especially in the digital ecosystem, how can we make it more inclusive? How can we make the digital ecosystem more inclusive? And to Dr. Anil as well, what could be the big dream that we could aspire to in the future?
Fantastic. So we'll come to I think that's a great note to probably end the session. I'll give Dr. Anil a chance. Let me quickly run through those 3 questions first, and then we will close it with Dr. Anil. To answer your question first about making places or the digital places fully accessible and inclusive, I feel that the digital spaces are much easier to do than physical spaces. We have seen companies taking a lead. Apple is a classic example where they say that if your products are not accessible, we are not releasing it to market. And that is one of the reasons why the iPhone is so popular, especially with the VI community. And that was a critical design decision that Steve Jobs said. Most companies don't do that. I work for a software executive firm called SAP, and most companies are not keeping accessibility as a top priority. It's one of the priorities, but not the top priority. I think great companies that keep it at the front and center will have a huge advantage also with respect to the market share. Justice Saab, आपको मैं एक chance देना चाहता हूँ to answer that lady's beautiful question.
चांस तो अदालतों में हमेशा मिलती हैं, और मैं आपकी बात से मुत्तफिक नहीं हूँ. I don't agree with you कि किसी को ये लगे कि जो आपने कहा साडा हक ऐथे रख. अदालतों से उम्मीद होती है और होनी चाहिए. जिस रोज़ कोई शख्स नाउम्मीद हो जाए, उससे बड़ा जुल्म उस शख्स के साथ नहीं हो सकता है. I think it's the worst thing that you kill hope or aspiration of a people or a person. वक्त लग सकता है, लेकिन नाउम्मीदी मैं समझता हूँ उससे बुरी कोई चीज़ नहीं हो सकती है. और इतने बरसों का जो ये एक फहरिस्त है तमाम केसेस का, जजमेंट्स का, देखिए पहले 95 एक्ट था, उसको लेकर भी दुनिया यहाँ तक आगे चली है हम लोग। 2016 का एक्ट है, बहुत ही उम्दा एक्ट है, उसके वजह से कई जगह लोगों को सहूलतें मिल रही हैं। It's this act actually is empowering. It acknowledges your rights and it tells you that the state has to provide for it in this manner and this manner and in this manner, whether from the government, semi-government and other public agencies. So one has to pursue there. अब अगले शख्स को मालूम है, this is the right of this person, I can pursue it in this manner. So there is, hopelessness की कोई जगह नहीं है. My brother judge is sitting here, I know that. सब ने हर हाई कोर्ट में होता है ऐसा. It's only a question of a compassionate person, an aware person, taking the issue forward. हर शख्स नहीं कर सकता है. गांव में नहीं के लोग नहीं, उनको अपने हक के बारे में नहीं मालूम है. ये मुश्किल है. शहरों में तो है. हम सिर्फ रैम्स की बात क्यों करते हैं? आप अपने घर से बाहर निकल के कोशिश करिए चलने के लिए. मैं कहता हूँ अगर आप कोई शख्स व्हील चेयर में बैठ जाए या बैसाखी लेके चले, क्या वो 100 कदम चल सकता है सड़क पे? या वो जो फुटपाथ बना हुआ है? मुमकिन नहीं है, क्योंकि वहाँ पर कोई ठेला लगा के खड़ा हुआ है, कोई जूस वाला है, किसी ने अपने घर की पेवमेंट क्यों बना रखी है, तो आप ठोकरें खा के चलेंगे. एक बच्चा स्कूल से जो चलता है वो अपने घर आराम से खेलते हुए नहीं जा सकता, उसकी अम्मा हाथ पकड़े रहेगी उसकी. सोचिए ज़रा. और हम अपनी तादाद के बारे में हम फ़ख्र करते हैं, 140 करोड़ है. आज के 10 साल के बाद और 15 साल के बाद बुज़ुर्गों की तादाद कितनी हो जाएगी? हैव यू थॉट अबाउट इट? विल बी अबाउट 20 करोड़. तकरीबन 20-25 करोड़ लोग बुज़ुर्ग हो चुके होंगे. क्या उनको मुश्किलें नहीं होंगी? विल दे नॉट बी डिसेबल्ड? क्या वो छड़ी लेके नहीं चलेंगे? आँखें रोशनी कम नहीं हो जाएगी उनकी? वो कुछ देखिए, एक होता है पैदाइशी मुश्किल होती है, एक होता है एक्सीडेंट के थ्रू होता है, एक उम्र के साथ होता है. तो ये सब, ऑल दीज लीड टू डिसेबिलिटीज़. वी हैव टू थिंक ऑफ ऑल दोज एस्पेक्ट्स. वो जंग उस वक्त नहीं लड़ी जाएगी, वो जंग अभी लड़ी जाएगी. और लड़ने की बात नहीं है, सहूलतों को पैदा करने की बात है, वहाँ पहुँचाने की बात है. सो वी हैव टू थिंक ऑफ द फ्यूचर बाय ऑगमेंटिंग द फैसिलिटीज़ इन द प्रेजेंट. ये मैं समझता हूँ ये हमारी बुनियादी ज़रूरत है.
Thank you.
और किसी ने यहाँ कुछ कहा था.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I wish there were more justices and some of the stories, some of the landmark judgments he has passed. I wish we had the time to listen from him, but we'll do that later on. I'll have time for one more question. We have 2 more questions. Okay. Can you pass the microphone, please? Yes.
Thank you. I'm Shrey Chanda. I have academically working on disability. My question is, when we are talking about disability and measuring it,
Yes.
whatever talking is qualitative and it's very important, I know. But when you are talking about any program and policy, we need the number.
Yeah.
And when you are looking at the number, we just have census, and which is long delayed.
Yeah.
And another, we have national NSS, National Statistical Organization. They are providing numbers. So all these things are giving very specific and very few numbers that cannot cover all those aspects. Until and unless one cannot do a qualitative study by themselves,
Absolutely.
it's not possible, and most of the data are not available. So what government or fraternity is thinking about it to promote all these things, so can we have better number
Fantastic.
and better policies?
I get your
Thank you.
question. Anil Saab, Dr. Anil can give a quick answer to that, a quick 1-minute answer to that about data.
No, I will take 2 minutes.
Okay,
Or more.
2
Because
minutes.
one thing I want to say, we must upload the role of our Indian judiciary in the way they have protected the rights of persons with disabilities. And I say this evidence right now, at this moment as I speak to you. I have done a number of court cases, PINs, in last 25 years. At present, 9 of my PINs are running in various high courts of the country on education, employment, accessory persons with disabilities. And the kind of judgments we have got from Indian judiciaries, the life as we have for persons with disabilities would not be possible if those judgments had not come through. So the Indian judiciary is very optimistic. We must express our gratitude. Not but Justice Waziri is sitting there, but I mean it, because without Indian judiciary, we would not be able to get what we have today. Second, my response to Vidur and about data, digital platform is a boon for persons with disabilities in every respect. Thanks to that, I am able to now understand every image on my iPhone by using an app without taking any hand of any person who is non-visually impaired. Every picture, every image can be described to me. A hearing impaired person can get the transcript on screen for whatever has been spoken. There are also provisions for audio description. The only way we can ensure more digital accessibility and digital environment is that companies must put a mandatory condition that without accessibility, nothing will go to the market. One,
Yeah.
I would again say JNF should make it a rule or at least a strong recommendation that unless a book is there in a born accessible format by a public author, that
Book will not be released.
yeah, I mean at least JNF would be discouraging such publications which are not born accessible. I have a session tomorrow where I'm with two authors, and I found that none of the books, two books were in accessible format, so I had to get it converted. I think JNF, if it can do that with authors and publishers, there are already copyright laws exceptions in place. It would be a great contribution. Or the data, yes, there's a problem. Data is never correct, can never be correct, but be assured the data would never tell the true picture. It has never done so. These are government-controlled statistics. That's another problem. The surveying issues are there. So we should go by an average of multiple data is available. I would still say the number of persons with disabilities in the world is around 15%.
Yeah.
I go with the WHO data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anil. I think we have run out of time here. Do we have one more question? No, we have an author signing there, so please feel free to meet two of the authors on the panel, actually me included, at the author signing session at the end of the session. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to this wonderful panelist. And my apologies that I couldn't have more conversations with the panelists on the stage. But thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day.